Welcome. This is a public meeting as required by the Planning Act to provide an opportunity to provide input with respect to a proposed minor variance at 203 Willow Street in the municipality of Central Elgin. Does any member of the committee have a disclosure of interest concerning this proposal? What method of notice and when was notice given to the public for this meeting? Ms. Leach, please.
Mr. Chair, as per requirements of the Planning Act, notice was mailed by regular post to every owner of land within 60 meters of the subject land and applicable agencies on November 13th, 2024. Notice was physically posted to the property by municipal staff, and notice was also posted to the municipal website.
Thank you. Do we have the applicant or agent in attendance wishing to speak to this application? Microphone is here, sir.
Hello, Council. I'm Mark Brown. We looked at redoing our deck at 203 Willow. Went and applied for a permit and found out that we were in violation of I guess a couple of things. It was an existing deck that was already there, but it was too close on the north side and too close to the road, I believe. So our next step was to apply for a variance, and which we did, and that's what brings us here tonight.
Ms. Leach, have you received any written submissions regarding the proposal?
Mr. Chair, I have not.
Is there anyone online that wishes to speak to the proposal? Any further questions for the applicant? Seeing none, everyone has been provided a fair opportunity to be heard. Is the committee prepared to make a decision or reserve its decision? Councillor Graham.
I'd like to defer this application. There's been some questions and some items from the public that have arisen, and I'd like to give staff the opportunity to address them, please.
Thank you. Councillor Connors? Thank you. We have a deferral on the table to a future meeting pending staff consideration. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Those wanting to be notified of the committee's decision on any application should contact the municipality. This public meeting is adjourned at 6:04 p.m. Thank you. Okay. This is a public meeting as required by the Planning Act to afford any person an opportunity to make representation with respect to a proposed zoning bylaw amendment respecting 384 George Street, an official plan amendment respecting 349 George Street. Before we begin, I ask that all participants, members of the council, those choosing to be, if you're attending in person, please come forward to the podium and state your name and address for the record before asking your question. And if anyone's online, Ms. Leach, do we have anyone online?
Mayor Sloan, we have the agent for the application online.
Okay, so you're going to have to help me out on this one because we're doing two at the same one. I take it we're doing 384 George Street first. So we're going to have someone speak to that before we go to 349 George Street. Thank you. Firstly, does any member of council have a disclosure of interest concerning either of these proposals? Seeing none. Ms. Leach, what method of notice and when was the notice given to the public for this meeting, please?
Mayor Sloan, as per requirements of the Planning Act, notice was mailed by regular post to every owner of land within 120 meters of the subject land and applicable agencies on November 5th, 2024. Notice was physically posted to the property by municipal staff, and notice was also posted to the municipal website.
Thank you. Mr. McClure, our planner is going to present and explain the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mayor Sloan. If I could just share my screen. Thank you, Mayor Sloan. So as can be seen on the screen, this is a public meeting to present a draft zoning bylaw amendment for 384 George Street. As can be seen again on the screen, the subject lands are south of George, just south of the new Kokomo subdivision. The purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment is to introduce a new site-specific residential zone to permit a 8-unit residential development on the property. As part of that process, the amendment would be repealing the existing zone on the property that already allows for a total of 8 single detached dwellings at the time of the passing of the bylaw. This was introduced back in 2017 to deal with the existing essentially cabins in development that were on the property, and to introduce also a holding provision for technical matters with respect to the site, namely the conveyance of a road widening at the front of the site, and also to deal with the legal status of the property itself. It currently consists of 3 parcels, so they need to have those merged. So this dates back quite some time now. Original staff report was back in 2023, the beginning of 2023. There were certain concerns raised by staff with respect to the road widening, off-street parking provisions. The applicant had requested that the proposal be put on hold to address those concerns, and then a revised proposal was brought forward to the municipality late summer, early fall. New report was on the November 5th agenda, and based on the outcome of that update, the staff's concerns were addressed. So this gives you a bit of a site context of what's on the property currently. So that's where you have the existing cabin development moving down the street to kind of see what's there. And then this is what is being proposed. So 2 banks, so essentially 4 town units. As part of that, there's a lower portion of the property that has a natural heritage and natural hazard designation on the parcel. But as can be seen, there is the gradation of where the drip line buffer, and as part of the update, there was a geotechnical setback. All of the development and the zoning reflective through what I'll be bringing through the bylaw itself respects the recommendations of the proposal and the supporting studies. This brings us to the amendment itself. Part 1 of the amendment repeals the bylaw that I kind of referred to back in 2017, which is bylaw 2163. Part 2 of the amendment introduces Schedule A to the bylaw, being map part 2BI. As you'll see, there's a Schedule B, which is Schedule 36 to the amendment, given the peculiarities of the site and dealing with buildable envelopes as part of the proposal. It's easier to show that on a schedule. So this is what was agreed to with the applicant. This Part 4 of the amendment itself designates the area shown on Schedule A in heavy solid lines as that R1-98. So you can see on the schedule, there's this HR1-98. So the holding we'll get into deals with those technical matters, and then the rear of the property deals with the site-specific OS2-8 zone. And then this is the schedule itself, kind of outlines the subject lands, the buildable envelopes, parking areas, open space areas where no development is to occur. And then the text of the amendment introduces a new section to section 9.2.298, which is the special provisions of the R1 zone, defines the area shown on map part 2BI as the R1-98, provides that the only permitted buildings and structures are townhouse dwellings to a maximum of 8 units, and accessory buildings and structures. Provides that the lot frontage is 61 meters, lot depth 53 meters. Location of buildings and structures, this puts it back to the schedule just to show that those townhouse units can only occur in those buildable envelopes on Schedule 36. And then provides a notwithstanding clause in there just to deal with unitary equipment and fencing. So ultimately noting that there's going to be air conditioners and that may encroach a bit into those that buildable envelopes, but essentially it's not permitted in the front yard or that kind of open space area. Provides for a maximum floor ratio of 0.43, ground floor area minimum, of 91 square meters. And then the exceptions to the general provisions of the R1 zone. The holding zone, then the H that's on the schedule, provides that the merging of parcels occur. So it's currently three lots on a registered plan of subdivision. So in order to address the zone, it's a technical matter that they can go through either a deeming bylaw or other mechanisms, but ultimately that needs to be addressed before the holding is removed, and then that the road widening be taken. And as long as those things are done, we can remove the holding. Part 6 of the amendment then introduces the hatched area on that map part as OS2-8, and then provides that new section to that OS2 section of the Port Stanley bylaw, being 8.3.2.8, defines that area in that map part and only permits drainage purposes, conservation purposes within that area. Same thing with the permitted buildings and structures, only municipal approved drainage purposes and conservation purposes by the municipality or the conservation authority, and then again provides an exception to the general provisions of that OS2 zone. And then as we do with all of these, in eventual consolidation of the bylaw, we introduce Schedule C, which consolidates all of the amendments that have occurred to map part 2 to date, including those that are provided through this amendment. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. McClure. Question for me. You talked about, and I'm not sure, we're doing these together. They're both on George Street. So we talk about in the first one here that staff are generally supportive of an infill and intensification proposal. But then you brought up heritage. Can you explain to me the designation and how heritage applies to vacant land?
Sure. With respect to this specific property, there's a small portion along the rear of the property that is designated natural heritage and natural hazard within the municipality's official plan. So as part of any sort of application, regardless of whether or not it's infill or what, when you're going through land use planning process, there's certain triggers to undertake appropriate studies to demonstrate that there's either no negative impacts, that it's not within a hazard. There's similarly, when we went through this process, the Kettle Creek Conservation Authority was part of that process and then commented on what was being submitted. They had no concerns with respect to what was being proposed, because as part of the hazard, in this instance, there was a recommendation for 6-meter erosion access allowance as part to ensure that there's no potential impacts to that slope. So ultimately, as part of this process, and as you saw in that OS2-8 zone, it incorporated the recommendations of both the natural heritage and the natural hazard studies to ensure that there was no development in those areas.
Okay, sorry, thanks. Just to follow up, so you say a small proportion is heritage. What have you got the size? How does it come out with the size regarding what's heritage compared to the whole lot, please?
And again, that goes back to what's designated within the official plan. So, again, I can't provide exactly what the number was, but it was a small sliver along the back portion of the property. And again, it goes back to, these are trigger distances. So anything with 120 meters of a natural heritage feature, 30 meters of a natural hazard, triggers through official plan policy that appropriate studies are undertaken in order to demonstrate what the potential impacts of the proposal would be. So notwithstanding, and there's an understanding in the official plan that natural heritage features and natural hazard features are, especially at an official plan level, are looked at through a desktop exercise, because when you do an update to an official plan, the municipality is not necessarily going to be going on the ground through every square inch of the municipality. So this triggers through when there's a request made for a change of land use or a development proposal to go on the ground to essentially ground truth what is there. Through that process and through this application process, there were supporting studies that essentially were submitted to the satisfaction of Kettle Creek and the municipality that what was being proposed met the policy requirements and also ensured that there would be no negative impacts.
So what percentage of the files that are coming to me are going to have some issue with to this council, rather, not just to me, of course, it's a team of council. What percentage are going to have issues with respect to, quote, natural heritage?
It would all be dependent on where the property is and whether or not it's adjacent to or within a natural heritage feature. So, and that would be identified within schedules on the municipality's official plan. So the applicants or landowners prior to submitting an application would be well aware of what potential constraints would be on their property as they would be notified and advised of that well in advance of any application submission or the requirement to undertake any studies to try to demonstrate development within or adjacent to features.
Any other questions or Councillor Graham, please?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you, Mr. McClure, and you did a great job in the workshop explaining the benefits of natural hazard and natural heritage. I just have a question about the parking. I thought our parking bylaw was 1.25 for every residence or every, it's not 1.25? 1.25 spaces.
Thank you. In general, the parking requirement is 1.5. 1.5 spaces. So this in this instance, generally, again, when you have the zoning, most residential single detached residential units would have 2 spaces because when you round up, that's the way you kind of address it. The 1.5 would generally be used when you're dealing with like multi-unit residential types of development, where you could have units that have only 1 car, but accounts for off-street parking for visitors and those types of things.
Any other questions from council? Ms. Leach, have you received any written submissions on the proposal, please?
Mayor Sloan, I received a copy of a presentation from the applicant's agent.
So do we have a presentation to be provided by the agent, Ms. Leach?
Yes, sir, we do. I believe Christian is online to provide the presentation.
Yes, I am available. Thank you, everyone. So my name is Christian Simonidis. I'm a planner with Arcadis, formerly known as IBI Group, here on behalf of our client, Caliber Contracting. So this evening, I will be providing an overview of the proposal, as well as the supporting studies that were provided. First, I'd like to also say thank you to Kevin for the presentation. He certainly touched on a lot of the aspects that were noted tonight, or at least noted in my presentation. And I'd also like to note that I'm joined by Emma Tillery from our office, who is a planning technician that also ultimately helped prepare a number of the submission materials for you tonight. So again, I understand that this is a public information meeting for information purposes, and no decision of council will be made. And I'd also like to, I guess, apologize in advance and say that I'm not familiar with all of your names. So at the end, when there are questions, I may refer to you just as counselor. So I do apologize, and hopefully in the future, I'll remember all of your names. So I can certainly begin my presentation now. So if you don't mind scrolling to the next slide, please. Yeah, so as noted, the subject property is identified as 384 George Street. It's located on the south side, approximately 0.37 hectares in size. There's currently 8 dwellings that are on the subject property as it stands today, and our proposal is for 8 dwelling units. So it's 8 will be removed, 8 will be added, so there's no net gain in the amount of dwellings that exist today on site. As noted previously, there's natural heritage area just to the south of the subject property. I'm going to touch on that further in my presentation, as well as existing single and semi-detached dwellings both to the east and west, and the new subdivision of single detached dwellings to the north, as well as the storm water management pond. So next slide, please. Yeah, so this just gives a bit of an overview of the neighborhood context in relation to the subject property. So the subject property is relatively close to the Lake Erie shoreline, as well as the Port Stanley Harbor and our downtown to the east. So certainly within proximity of numerous amenities, goods, and services, et cetera. So yeah, ultimately, again, this provides more of a bird's eye view of what's in the area, natural heritage to the south, and then residential development all surrounding the subject property as well. So next slide, please. Yeah, so this gives an overview of the proposed development. Again, there are 8 townhouse dwellings. Sorry, it should say 8 townhouse dwellings, not buildings, that are separated into 2 distinct blocks. So there'll be 4 on the west side, 4 on the east side. The townhouses will be 2 stories in height. 8 driveway parking spaces are provided, as well as 4 visitor parking spaces. So it will be have a total parking ratio of 1.25 spaces, which includes visitor, which meets the zoning bylaw requirement, as I understand, and it's not being requested as a site-specific exception, so it meets that. Also, there's a central private access that goes straight through the property with a hammerhead turnaround to allow for appropriate turning radius for garbage collection, et cetera, as well as any cars that may enter. The parking spaces for visitors are located in the southwest. And also with respect to the non-developable area, you can see there are 3 lines. So really the important one, if you will, is that yellow line there. So the yellow line essentially symbolizes the limit of development where that OS2 site-specific zone will end up. And as noted by Kevin, there will be no or very limited development permitted within that area, subject to any approvals from the municipality as well as the Conservation Authority. So that ensures the protection of the natural heritage feature to the south. And then, as noted previously, there's a road widening, as you can see in that little triangle that's in the north end of the property. So next slide, please. Yeah, so I won't get too into the details of this. There's a lot of text, but certainly Kevin provided an overview of what's being proposed in terms of the site specifics. Again, there are 2 zones being proposed, the HR1-98 zone for where the townhouses and the access and such will be located. And then in the south is where that OS2-8 zone is, again, to prohibit any form of development without the approval of the municipality as well as Conservation Authority. So next slide, please. And again, this is just the overview. That bold black line in the middle there that creates the distinction between the OS2 zone as well as the HR1 zone. That's where that yellow line was noted. And I'll note that yellow line was directly correlated to a scoped environmental impact study that was prepared by RJ Burnside in support of this application. And that is ultimately implementing the recommendations from a qualified ecologist. So next slide, please. Yeah, so ultimately there are 3 main approaches really with this application in terms of the justification. So first was a review of the planning side of things. So a planning justification report was prepared by our firm to review the policy planning framework, which includes the provincial planning statement, County of Elgin official plan, as well as the municipality's official plan and the Village of Port Stanley zoning bylaw. The second, which was very important, notably to us, as well as the Conservation Authority and the municipality, is the environmental aspect. So a scoped environmental impact study was prepared. And ultimately, this proposed zoning bylaw amendment will implement those recommendations through that 10-meter buffer, through that OS2 zone, and will ultimately protect the natural heritage features that are located to the south. And then the third being a functional servicing brief that was prepared with respect to existing infrastructure, as well as demonstrating serviceability, being that it is located within a Tier 1 settlement area where both municipal water and sanitary services are available and can service this development. Next slide, please. Yeah, again, so we went through the planning justification aspect of it. Again, in our opinion, that based on the documents noted in the first paragraph, this represents certainly an appropriate and modest scale of infill development where development is directed and encouraged within Tier 1 settlement areas. It meets the intended purpose of both the residential and the natural heritage land use designation. This use is permitted in the residential land use designation, which is why an official plan amendment is not required and just a zoning bylaw amendment. This would also make efficient use of existing municipal servicing where development is intended to be directed. Also provides a greater range of housing types to the community as well. And again, the appropriate buffers are provided to protect the natural heritage as per the recommendations of that scoped environmental impact study. Next slide. And again, this is just an overview. Yeah, again, the residential this is the official plan of Central Elgin. Red is residential. Sorry, yellow is residential and green is natural heritage. So next slide. So in terms of the summary next steps to just sort of finalize my presentation here, again, we believe that this is an opportunity to develop lands that are within the existing Tier 1 settlement area of Port Stanley. It also provides a range of housing types and densities within the neighborhoods. Again, 8 units exist today. 8 will be implemented with this, so there's no net gain in units. It addresses the natural heritage aspect and meets all the provincial planning statement policies, as well as the county and local official plan policies to support such development. Again, we know that tonight there's no decision being made, but certainly here to address any questions. And then in the subsequent council meeting, that is where I understand a decision will be made of council on this zoning bylaw amendment applications. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you all tonight. And again, I'll be available for any questions or comments. So thanks.
Very, very, very helpful for the presentation, or very, very helpful, and we thank you for the presentation. Does any member of council have any questions after the presentation? I really don't like this. Does any of the member of the public that's either online or in the gallery wish to speak to this? Okay, we're now moving on to proposed official plan amendment 349 George Street. Ms. Leach, what method of notice and when was the notice given to the public for this meeting, please?
Mayor Sloan, as per requirements of the Planning Act, notice was mailed by regular post to every owner of land within 120 meters of the subject land and applicable agencies on November 5th, 2024, and notice was physically posted to the property.
Thank you. Mr. McClure?
Thank you, Mayor Sloan. So has been provided. Hopefully that's not my car, but I guess we'll find out. This is a public meeting to present a draft official plan amendment for 349 George Street. Okay.
Apologies, Mr. McClure. We have
It's okay.
we've resolved the situation. Thanks, Kevin.
Yep. So as you can see on the screen, this is the subject lands. 349 George Street is north, I guess north of George, kind of in between Front Street and Cinnamon Street in Port Stanley. The request being brought forward today is for a site-specific official plan amendment to allow the creation of 2 residential lots. Associated consent files or consent applications with the Elgin County has been placed on hold, given the current land use designations on the parcel. So as you can kind of see on the screen right now, this is generally the configuration that was put forward through those land division applications with the county. Staff reports were put forward on the official plan amendment and the consent applications of the April 29th council agenda. And ultimately, what has been requested through this is a change to the natural heritage designation on the property. No changes have been requested to the natural hazard overlay through this amendment. Staff reports, as again noted on the April 29th agendas, raised concerns with respect to both the consents and the official plan amendment. And then the County of Elgin and the Kettle Creek Conservation Authority also raised concerns. So again, this is kind of showing the rationale and the reason why the amendment is being requested. This is the lot configuration based on again, the existing designations on the property. Later on in the presentation, you'll see what the requested designation change is. So the official plan amendment application was deferred at the request of the applicant in May of this year. Staff and agencies met in June of this year to kind of discuss the concerns. And at that time, it was indicated that they would be addressed. And then later on, late September, we received a letter to advance the application and proposal to a public meeting. We didn't receive any additional materials on the application until November 13th and 14th. And they were circulated to the commenting agencies at that time. The concerns have been, as best of my knowledge, have been circulated to council and the applicant, and those concerns remain. Although I believe with the Kettle Creek Conservation Authority, there were aspects that were addressed, but in general, the overall concerns remain with respect to approval or potential, adoption of the official plan amendment. This is just again kind of giving context. So coming down George, heading east, you can see the existing kind of dwelling to the left as we kind of come through. Again, this is now going further down to now where the area of the proposed severance and that is. You can see kind of like the cresting of the hill and George. Again, I always like to iterate that the Google Street View doesn't always give you the best indication, but it kind of shows some of the concerns that were raised. One of the raised concerns by Central Elgin staff was the request or provision for hidden driveways for the application, and I guess this kind of shows a little bit of the site context of why that was raised. So again, this is the severance concept plan that was provided and circulated as part of the original applications. Again, showing the existing dwelling and the detached garage structure with the general location, again, kind of showing, I can't really show it on with my cursor, but again, the kind of like proposed dwellings shown on the lower portion of the property with the shared driveway that's also, I guess, proposed here as well. And then this is more from the revised geotechnical that was submitted, ultimately kind of showing the topography of the site. One thing to note, and again, it's really hard to kind of see on the site, and it was, again, kind of going back to some of the concerns that were raised as part of the application process, is that north of the two residential dwellings, there's a proposed retaining wall that is essentially to support the development as part of the requirements or recommendations. And you'll see in the schedule, they were not proposing to alter or show that the development was not going to be in a hazard, is that they could safely build in the hazard, although there are policies within the municipality's official plan that prohibits land stabilization works or engineering works to allow for development. In this case, as you can also see, and again, it's really hard to kind of, I guess, kind of see my cursor slowly going down there around this area here on the screen. The retaining wall does cross property lines for the purposes of the provincial planning statement and the municipality's official plan. Lot creation is also considered development, so there are concerns about the lots being created in a hazard in the heritage feature, but then also portions of the development along the upper portion here is also shown to be crossing into a natural hazard. These are things that the Kettle Creek Conservation Authority raised as well. So this brings us to the amendment itself. It's pretty simple amendment. Essentially, item 1 of the amendment is amending Schedule G to the Community of Port Stanley Land Use Plan, essentially changing the areas on the plan that are kind of outlined from natural heritage to residential. So this again shows the subject lands in the location plan, and then provision of the inset on the map there shows a highlighted area that's going from that what is currently designated as natural heritage is green to yellow, but as was circulated to the applicant and confirmed, no change is being requested to the natural hazard overlay. Then again, it's hard to see on here, but again, there's a little overlay inset that shows what the proposed lot boundaries would be. Again, it kind of shows that it is crossing that natural hazard overlay. It does cross into the rear of the natural heritage feature. There are policies that do speak to not permitting lot creation within natural hazards. So again, those concerns remain, and I am aware that the applicant is here to also present and provide some more, I guess, follow up on that.
Thank you, Mr. McClure. Firstly, let me ask the deputy clerk, do we have any written, Ms. Leach, any written submissions on the proposal?
Mayor Sloan, the following correspondence has been received from Chuck and Suzanne Semple, adjoining landowners, with environmental concerns regarding environmental sensitivities and the proposed designation change. From Mervyn Reed, an adjoining landowner with concerns regarding loss of trees, drainage, wind buffer, increased runoff, and erosion and slope failure. From Kettle Creek Conservation Authority, with a response to the revised studies indicating that Kettle Creek Conservation Authority staff continue to not support the proposed official plan amendment or consent applications, as the requirements of the applicable natural hazard and regulations have not been met to inform a decision on the merits. From Lorraine Reed, adjoining landowner with concerns regarding loss of trees, drainage, wind buffer, increased runoff, and erosion and slope failure, flooding and erosion and woodland conservation. From Dan Frick, with concerns regarding local ecology and heritage zone, local history, water quality, and community character. And from Shirley Miles, with concerns regarding the setting of a precedent, elevation, and stewardship.
Thank you, Ms. Leach. Do I have the proponent here to make a presentation on this file this evening? If so, could they come forward, please, or is it being done virtually? Oh, they are with us. If you just come to the microphone, press the button, state your name, we'd be glad to hear your presentation. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Victoria Colantonio. I'm here from Urban and Mine Planning Consultants. I'm representing the applicant for 349 George Street. I believe there is a presentation. Okay.
Great to speak up, right, or stand somebody. We're all set?
Great, thank you.
Veritable. Please proceed.
Thank you. So I'm just going to touch very briefly on the beginning of my presentation because Mr. McClure already covered a lot of the policy that I'm going to be going through. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to briefly go over the site context and statistics, policy overview, the overview of our proposed development and official plan amendment, as well as answer any questions at the end of the presentation. And my colleague, Terrence, will also be available to answer any questions. Next slide, please. So as Kevin mentioned, the subject property is located on the north side of George Street between Front Street and Sydenham Street. And it is primarily bordered by residential properties and forested lands. There are some commercial and institutional uses to the far east. Next slide, please. And again, here are the Google Map images, which do not do the property justice, but this is a subject property. The image on the right is the portion of the subject property that is proposed to be developed and is the focus of this official plan amendment. And the one on the left is what is existing on one portion of the subject property. Next slide, please. As previously mentioned, the Central Elgin official plan designates the area of Port Stanley, the village of Port Stanley, as a Tier 1 settlement area, which are meant to support residential intensification for large populations and are typically fully serviced. Next slide, please. The municipality of Central Elgin official plan designates the property as residential, natural heritage, and natural hazard. I will be getting more into the natural heritage and natural hazard designations, or the natural hazard overlay rather, later on in the presentation. However, I would just like to touch upon the residential designation right now. So residential intensification is supported within the built-up areas of the urban settlement area, and lands within the urban settlement areas are either already fully serviced or are serviceable. Next slide, please. The municipality of Central Elgin zoning bylaw does have the property zoned as R169, which is a residential zone. For the purpose of this proposed development, we are not asking for a zoning bylaw amendment as we are in the residential zone, and the residential zone, the R169 zone, specifically supports single detached dwellings, which would be the preferred use of the subject property once developed. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. This is our proposed severance plan for the subject property. So as previously mentioned, the proposed development, part 1 is already developed as a residential property with a single detached dwelling and an accessory garage structure. And part 2 is located to the immediate east of the subject property and is proposed to be low density residential in the form of single detached dwelling. And part 3 similarly will be the exact same, low density residential single detached dwelling. Next slide, please. Again, as we mentioned, there are no changes to the zoning bylaw. We're not asking for any relief in the form of minor variances or a zoning bylaw amendment as we are in the residential zone. So this is just site statistics of lots 1 and 2. Next slide, please. And lot 3. Again, I would like to stress that we are not asking for any relief from the zoning bylaw as we are zoned for residential uses. Next slide. And we also just wanted to touch upon the similarities between 384 George Street, which we talked about previously, and our property at 349 George Street. We did provide quite a lot of studies for the justification of this proposed development. So I would like to stress on the EIS, the Environmental Impact Statement, which was provided by Natural Resource Solutions Incorporated. As per the EIS, the development will abide by a 10-meter woodland buffer to mitigate disturbance to forest wildlife, as the natural heritage designation on the site is because of the presence of woodland. So the proposed building envelope for part 2 and 3 have been adjusted so that the proposed construction, any proposed construction, will occur outside of this required buffer. So we have, if you could go to the last slide of the presentation. There we go. So the green dotted line is the 10-meter buffer from the drip line, which is the green solid line on this plan. And you can see outlined in the black, part 2 and 3. And you can also see the black dotted line, which is the building footprint, proposed building footprint. So you can see the distance between the 10-meter buffer and the proposed building envelope and building footprint. So it is important to note that the building footprints will be significantly smaller than the building envelopes, and any additional grading or construction will be able to occur within the established buffers, with special consideration to be given to on-site woodland features to ensure the protection and maintenance of the natural heritage features on the site. Further, a slope stability analysis was completed by professional engineers, Egmont Associates. This analysis concluded that the existing slopes could support the proposed development of parts 2 and 3 without impacting the stability of the slopes. In addition, setbacks from the stable top of bank and stable bottom of slope can also be accommodated for with the proposed development. Overall, appropriate and necessary measures will be taken to ensure that development does not negatively impact the natural heritage and natural hazard areas of the subject property. I would like to stress again that the primary purpose of this application is to change the land use, and we're not talking about the severance at this time. We're simply focusing on the land use for residential in the areas outlined. So the residential, I believe Kevin showed it in his presentation, the residential boundary, it will be bound by the dotted green line, which is our 10-meter buffer from the drip line of the wooded area in the back portion of the property, which is the natural heritage feature. I'll take any questions now. Thank you. Oh,
Just to add a few comments here before we wrap this up. So a couple of concerning things is we looked at the property before, this 348, and the similarities to our property. They both deal with hazard, they both deal with natural heritage. And then how did the 348 mitigate or control or resolve the issues is pertinent to how we resolved our issues as well. So as Mr. McClure indicated, we did submit revised information, revised studies to address many of the town, county, and conservation authority concerns. We were told that if we didn't have it in by November 15th, the report would not come to before council tonight. We submitted on November 13th. Again, I have an email here to show when we submitted it. And unfortunately, if you look at the date on staff's report, it says April 29th. We do not have a staff report for this evening. They're using, Mr. McClure has used the report from April 29th to move forward to this meeting tonight. And in my opinion, it's greatly out of date because we did submit additional studies and additional information that resolved a number of the concerns that were raised back then. Unfortunately, that wasn't before you today. What has happened is the, well, if we had a report today, I'm sure it would say that the official plan is a interpretive document. It's not static, it's not black and white. It's based basically on, these are the issues, the problems or the interests that we have in this municipality. We're going to identify in the official plan. We're going to have a 10,000-foot view, and we're going to draw lines around where these issues are so that we know that they're there, that they'll be accounted for, and they'll be investigated when something comes forward that we want to impact that property. In this case, the interpretive line are currently the hazard land and the natural heritage lines that were drawn. And if we had the report tonight in front of you, it would also say, I'm sure, that you can only develop in a natural heritage area if you do an EIS to prove where that line actually falls. So instead of the 10,000-foot line where it would fall, we have to go down to ground level and say, on the ground, this is where that line actually is. So we've done that. We've gone out, we've created an EIS, we've done an addendum to the EIS and did a matrix to identify all the issues that were brought forward. In addition, we've talked about a traffic study in order to look at the views of the road. We've done a planning justification study. We've done a tree inventory protection. We've done a phase 1 environmental, and we've done a slope stability study. So out of this, we have professional engineers, arborists, botanists, et cetera, to tell us where do these lines fall. In terms of the natural heritage, if you can go to that slide, the last slide of the presentation, might be easiest to describe them. So in this case, you can see our arborists, following the requirements of the PPS 24, which is the Provincial Policy Statement 24, as well as the Planning Act, as well as good practices, and has been doing this for decades, has proven that the area associated here, the natural heritage, when you think of it, it's not the whole trees and everything natural heritage, it's the core. Where is this natural heritage occurring? And if we remove a portion of it, does that portion negatively impact the core or the ecosystem of this natural heritage feature? And if you are negatively influencing this natural feature, I agree, there should be no development there. But what our ecologists and arborists have done is looked at it and said, you know what? If you removed this portion of the woodland or something, and it's not all going to be removed, mind you, but if you were to remove that portion of woodland, would the integrity of that natural heritage still be intact? Would it be viable? Would it be vibrant, et cetera? And the answer is yes. We can remove this portion of the lot from the natural heritage, and the core and the essence of the natural heritage will remain. It's not going to be negatively impacted. So then we look at some of the comments that were in the report. And if a new report was here, I'm sure it would also say that you can't look at the statement in the PPS or the official plan that says no negative impact shall happen on the natural heritage. Because if you think about it, you're at the edge of a forest and you step on a blade of grass, there is a negative impact to that natural heritage feature. That's not what the intent says. Again, if you had a butterfly flap its wings and you prevented that from happening in Taiwan, the reverberated effects would again, theoretically, affect the development here if you looked at it as no negative impact happens. What it means though, the interpretation is no net impacts will happen, no net negative impacts. So by removing this, is there a net impact to that natural heritage feature? In this case, we've proven that there's not a net impact to this natural heritage feature. The heritage feature will remain, it will be viable, it will continue to operate on its own, even with the removal of this area. So we feel that again, we're not talking, sorry, I would jump ahead too. We talked about severance tonight. We're not talking about severance. We talked about development. We're not talking about development. Tonight, all we're talking about is an official plan, a line on the official plan. The severance, development, conservation, that will all take place later. Council will have an opportunity to say no to that or yes to it based on the facts at the time. That's not in the equation tonight. The equation is, does the official plan make sense? Do the studies that we provided make sense to say, instead of the 10,000 level, we're going down to the street level and saying this is where it actually should occur. Now, because of that, if we say, yes, it should occur here, and that then translates into a severance, so be it. We'll talk about that at that time. But we're not asking for that tonight, and that's not what should be considered tonight. So finally, in the hazard area, which is the other issue here, is you can develop in hazard land as long as you don't negatively impact or create additional stress, danger, et cetera. In this case, it would be erosion. It would be on a slope. So we had an engineer go out and look at it, and they said, you know what, we can, and it can be done that you could have a building envelope here that's on a safe slope. Now, obviously, when you look at the slope currently today, it's kind of a hill. When you remove the trees and vegetation, and we're not talking about the hill, we're actually talking about below that, is when you remove that to create a building envelope, is that a stable slope? The answer is yes. You would look at it today and say, I don't know how that would be, but you have to assume that the top soil, et cetera, will be removed and you'll have a plateau. With that, the engineer, because again, we're talking about an official plan right now, we're not talking about development. The engineer came up and said, how do we do this? And they said, well, we'll put a retaining wall at the back. I appreciate Mr. McClure saying that that's not possible, that's not appropriate, that's not desirable. That was done as a concept for this, to say, is it feasible that this could be done? Because if it's not feasible at all, there's no sense even talking about this. But we proved that it is feasible. Now, with the retaining wall, what we will come back to do as part of the severance application when it comes before you is we're going to incorporate the retaining wall into the rear wall of the building. So if you think of a walkout building, which this will be, you come to the main floor and then you go to the first floor. So the wall itself will act as a retaining wall. So we don't need another retaining wall, which is the whole problem what Mr. McClure is suggesting. And again, that's not for discussion tonight. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a line on the official plan, which is interpretive. And we're trying to nail it down by using actual studies to say where those lines should be. And through that, we hope that then we can talk about a severance later on and talk to you about that then. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate that. Did you want to comment, Mr. McClure? I know that we're not voting on this, on anything about the information that wasn't provided that has been updated. What are our next steps, please?
Yes, I guess there's a number of things I can bring up. So just to be clear, there was never something to say that if information was received by this date, a follow-up staff report would be on tonight's agenda. It's always been, in his past practices have undertaken here, is that ultimately any information that is received, prior to a public meeting or after the notice is given, ultimately, as has been discussed, this is the opportunity to gather input from council and from the applicant and any members of the public in order where we were able to take that information back and provide a more fulsome report and follow-up report to advise council as to whether or not it's something that staff could support. That being said, the information that was circulated or provided on November 13th and 14th was circulated to the county and the Kettle Creek Conservation Authority. They still remain to have the same concerns that were addressed in my previous report. I would note that there's confirmation from Central Elgin staff that there is still concerns with respect to safe access to the property for the development, notwithstanding the applicant's agent bringing forward that we need to or should be looking at this in isolation. The application itself is, and as they've noted, to advance a development proposal. So
if I can just one quick sec. So if the county people have seen it and the staff have seen it, are the council going to see it? Is this council going to see it?
It should be. It should be. It was all submitted to the municipality, and I'm not too sure where that is. So whether or not it has been circulated to council. But to note to that end as well, we'll be providing another. I mean, again,
Thank you.
If it is the will of council, and I guess I'd like to get that now, confirmation that based on the information that you would like to see a follow-up staff report on that, but also just to note, and this is a point of, important point, is that notwithstanding that I'd say there may be support or not from municipal council would be adopting an official plan amendment and would be going to county council for approval. So notwithstanding that there could be potential opportunities for clarification or alleviating of concerns, we have a county comments on 2 occasions saying that they do not support it. We have Kettle Creek Conservation Authority that, irrespective of whether or not there is municipal or county approval, is within their regulated area. They've provided that they would not be in a position to issue permits for development or site alteration on the lands. So irrespective of what the county or the municipality's position is, the Kettle Creek Conservation Authority has come forward with, even with the new information, that they would not be in a position to support development on the property. The applicant's agent has also provided It is of their position that the EIS has sufficiently demonstrated that there's no negative impacts and that they should be able to clear out the specific area in order to permit development, because it's in their position that they can meet the specific policies of the official plan in the PPS. However, there are specific policies in the municipality's official plan that does provide that, notwithstanding that an EAS can demonstrate no negative impacts, it is the position of the municipality to find opportunities to enhance, restore, and improve natural heritage features and functions. There are policies within the official plan, and to note that the municipality has declared a climate emergency. To with respect, that policies in there note that there is an importance on ensuring that preservation of urban forest cover. There aren't, and just to put it out there, notwithstanding, there are a lot of good technical resources in that we review all applications on. There are no ecologists and biologists that review this. So it is on staff to provide those recommendations. However, through both the amended application and the previous applications, there are discrepancies and points of concern that have been raised and which were raised in previous reports. And it is the ability is there is an ability for council to allow for peer review should it so request.
I'm sorry, I have a meeting at 7 that we've got to get to. So I think we're in pretty good stead. We're getting a report back.
That's correct.
So are there any other questions that we have this evening? Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Graham, did you have a question? If there are no further questions, please be advised that any person wishing further information on the actions of council regarding the passing of a bylaw on the proposed amendment should email info@centralalgon.org indicating which public meeting they wish to be notified on and providing their name and address. Those who do not have access to a computer and wish to be notified should call 519-631-4860. Any amendment to the bylaw and official plan will be considered at a future meeting of council. Thank you.